Good morning, class of linguistics. Today we are going over the topic of morphology. But before we begin, let's answer a question we've all lied awake at night trying to answer for ourselves. What is morphology? The term morphology originates from the Greeks, morph meaning form or shape, and ology meaning the study of something. Morphology is the component of mental grammar that deals with types of words and how words are formed out of smaller, meaningful pieces and other words. The subcategory of linguistics, morphology, includes topics such as words and the process in which words are formed, various ways in which world languages use the morphological process, affixation, and how multimorphemic words are put together, and how to identify information about the morphological structure of languages. Morphology is rule-governed, and these rules state the process for forming new words. These rules include affixation, compounding, reduplication, alternations, and suppletion. Since the morphological process is highly rule-governed, we will break the process apart and discuss each rule in more depth. In basic terms, morphology looks at the way words are put together using small pieces called morphemes. To begin, we need to understand what a morpheme is and how they are organized. A morpheme is the smallest linguistic unit with meaning. If you remember, individual morphemes come in all shapes and sizes. They can be words like mustard, phone, hallelujah, underneath, the, and also prefixes like re, un, or suffixes like ing, ed, and able. They are all morphemes because each unit links back to a specific meaning, and their letters cannot be further subdivided into parts that will carry meaning. You're probably thinking, hey, not all morphemes are created equally and don't look like they should belong in the same category. And you're right. That's exactly what our forefather linguistics thought before us. So let's look at what is used to classify morphemes. There are two main characteristics used to distinguish between morphemes. Morphemes are classified as either bound or free, and then further classified as either being a content morpheme or a function morpheme. To determine whether a morpheme is free or bound is fairly simple. If the morpheme is a complete word without any help from any other morphemes, it is free. Conversely, when a morpheme requires additional pieces of information for it to make a complete word, then it is bound. When distinguishing between content morphemes and function morphemes, you can ask the question, does this have semantic meaning, or does this refer to something out in the world? Content morphemes have a more concrete meaning. They do refer to things out in the world, like fudge, glue, and also words like fly and costly. On the other hand, function morphemes are primarily grammatically relevant information and include morphemes like the, across, and the affix un. Now you're probably wondering, so what type of morphemes fall under each category anyway? And I'm so glad you asked, because I made this next slide anticipating this question. The slide gives a chart to show what kind of morphemes and words fall into each specific combined category. Our two distinguishing qualities create four distinct categories of morphemes, which are free content, free function, and bound function.
These next few slides have to do with the morphological processes involved in creating new words. We're going to talk about 5 different processes, each of which differs in usage between languages. The most widely used process is called affixation, which involves adding a letter or a group of letters to a word to alter its meaning. These letters can be added at the beginning of a word, which would be a prefix, at the end of a word, called a suffix, or in the middle of a word, which is called an infix. English does not use any infixes, but in some languages, infixes are used extensively. Examples of prefixes and suffixes are un in unload and ing in singing. For these examples, the affixes change the meaning of the root words load and sing. Another morphological process is compounding, which involves combining 2 free morphemes to make another free morpheme. Compound words come in different shapes and sizes. For example, ice cream, supermarket, and high risk are all compound words. If you're confused about whether a word is a compound word or not, look to see if it is functioning as one complete unit in the sentence. Reduplication is another process that is less common in English, but when it's used, it is to emphasize a certain word by repeating it directly after the first use. An example sentence is, I know Johnny likes you as a friend, but do you think he likes you? Alternation and suppletion are the final two processes. They are similar in that they both include changing letters to change the meaning of a word. However, alternations involve internal modifications, while suppletion includes one or more different word forms that are phonetically unrelated to the root word. An example of an alternation would be changing the word rise to rose. By changing the I to an O, we've put this present tense verb into its past tense form. An example of a suppletion would be changing the singular word mouse into its plural form, mice. Structurally speaking, mouse and mice are two totally different words. This next section is on the morphological types of languages. These categories of language basically describe which morphological processes the language uses and how it uses them. There's a kind of classification system for this, as you can see here. We've got a sort of taxonomical tree here. The first division is between analytic and synthetic languages. These two types are often referred to more descriptively as isolating and inflecting languages, respectively. Analytic languages are sequences of free morphemes. Each piece of the language can be taken by itself and it has a meaning independently. Affixes are not really used in these languages. Mandarin Chinese and various other East Asian languages are good examples of this. Synthetic languages, on the other hand, consist of bound morphemes attached to other morphemes. This means that a word may have several moving parts, and not all of those parts can stand independently. A great example of a synthetic language would be German, which is famous for squishing several words together to form one Uber word. Not only are compound words extremely common in German, but they also have conjugations and declensions to further complicate things. Under synthetic languages, looking back to the tree, we have agglutinating, fusional, and polysynthetic languages. In agglutinating languages, morphemes are pretty distinct. For example, in Swahili, the word ninasoma means I read. Each syllable of the word has its own distinct meaning. There is no overlap, and there are no extra letters thrown in. They're just tacked on one right after the other. In fusional languages, it can be much harder to tell the boundaries of each morpheme. Spanish is a great example of this. For example, the verb estar is irregular in the preterite and changes to estuve, estuviste, estuvo, etc., in which case it becomes difficult to tell where each morpheme begins and where it ends. Lastly, we have my least favorite, polysynthetic languages. Polysynthetic languages are among the most complicated. To quote the text, these involve highly complex words that may be formed by combining stems and affixes, usually making nouns a part of verbs. The example given in the book was that of fish catching. While it may sound unnatural to English speakers, it could add a nice efficiency to the flow of the language. So those are the categories of morphological types of languages. It can be very helpful to know these when learning a new language in order to better classify the target language and therefore have a better framework for the new knowledge. On the following slides, we have listed all the vocabulary terms from the chapter on morphology. Thanks for watching our presentation on how we make words in language. Happy studying and good luck on the final.